much, and I apologize to be speaking in English. The fact I do not speak Italian means I needn't have blushed through Alberto's introduction. And thank you also for inviting me to this wonderful, wonderful school. As I'm speaking in English, the poor translator must try and keep up with me. Please, if I'm going too fast, can you just ask me to slow down? It will help her because I can't see her. I'm talking now about bookshops in a deregulated market. I assume you all know what a deregulated market means. Quite simply, it means every bookshop and every other person who wishes to sell a book can do so at whatever price they like. Any price, in any shop, or any outlet. It means that our competitor here, W.H. Smith, has 60% off all its bestsellers. It means that Amazon will sell this best-selling book at Christmas that we generally sell for £26. All independents will sell for £26. They sell minus 67% for £8.49. That is what a deregulated market means. Publishers can give any discount they choose to anybody who wants to sell their books. Why is this interesting? Perhaps not particularly, except it causes a catastrophe for bookshops. In the UK, over 500 independent bookshops closed in the last decade, and most of the major chains closed. So big companies like Borders with over 2,000 booksellers, over 200 million sales, kaput. Were it not for a Russian billionaire, Waterstones would have closed in 2011. And the two other small chains in the United Kingdom both lose money. Blackwell's, the academic bookseller, sold their very profitable, wonderful publishing arm to fund the bookshops. It is a black hole. And Foyles loses money as well and is supported by Christopher Foyle because he's very clever with property investment. Again, why is this interesting to you in Italy? Unless you like watching car crashes on YouTube or horror movies, why would you be interested? Well, I think the reason is because this was totally avoidable. Not perhaps the full collapse in the market that took place. High street sales dropped from over 1.1 billion down to today's 700 million. And the share of that, of the total book market that went through bookshops, is now only 50% of books. But we now know that this needn't have taken place. And that is because we have sorted out what we do, and we have become much, much better booksellers. And the question is, why didn't we do this before we had to do it? And like many things that one does at the last minute, we in fact did it after we had to do it. Waterstones actually went bust, went bankrupt, and but for the accident of a Russian, would have disappeared. But we have now done it, And we've done it even though another catastrophe took place in our deregulated market. Kindle has been hugely successful in the United Kingdom, and that is directly related to the deregulation of the market, because the Kindle has been able to sell books or reading very much cheaper than the physical book. We lost 30% of our market in 4 years. For Waterstones, we lost £100 million worth of sales. We dropped from 500 to 400. And please remember, at the start of that, we were losing money. So this is what has happened with our earnings. We were making a little bit of money in 10-11. We then went bankrupt and started losing money. And since then, despite Kindle, and despite the continuing pressure from supermarkets and above all from Amazon, we are growing again. This, in fact, is an old slide. We've just had a very good Christmas, and that prediction of 27 million is in fact going to be about 32 million. Had we been running our business in 2010-11 as we do now, we would have made 78 million then, not 23. So what did we need to do, and why didn't we do it before we needed to? And I will talk through these really just to suggest that for those of you who don't yet need to do it, perhaps there is the occasional lesson. For me, there are 3 broad things you have to get right. You have to get your offer right. That is, the books that you present to people and the manner in which you present them. That, if you like, is the skeleton of the body of the bookshop. You then also have to run your business very efficiently. That is simple operational discipline. For me, that is the muscles, the flesh, the blood of the body. And lastly, you have to get the ethos of bookselling, the caliber of your booksellers right, and that is the soul of the body. You need to do that, and if you do it, there is no need for sales to drop. This is my own independent bookshop, 25 years. You can see where Kindle happened. There was a small drop, 3-4%, and then it's grown again. This year is a record year, almost continuous growth. You wouldn't know that the deregulated market was any problem, or even that Kindle had been launched. So we do the skeleton, we do the body, and we do the soul. And I'll just quickly talk through what I mean by that. The skeleton, that is the books that we have in our shops and the manner in which we offer them to our customers, needs to be constantly interrogated by booksellers. We can always do it better. We can have better books in our shops, and we can present them better. And I urge all my booksellers to constantly think through that. Start with your windows. I get sent pictures every day from shops of the windows they do. These arrived this morning. You can tell what is the most important literary book published today. Julian Barnes, The Noise of Time. On the other side is a thriller. These are not difficult windows to do. They don't take any time, but they grab our customers' attention and they demand that they come into our shops for these books. You start interesting, engaging, and demanding the attention of your customers from the minute they come close to your bookshop. The presentation thereafter has to be worked on and addressed. I don't think it's about money. It's not about having beautiful furniture or expensive shop fits. It's about care and attention and trusting your eye to make the most interesting possible presentation. This is what Waterstones used to look like. It is hideous, and it is totally unnecessary. Waterstones can still look like this. It causes me a certain amount of unhappiness. Tables that are messy, books on the floor. It is totally unnecessary. I'm not talking about rocket science or grand, inventive, or complex things. Just look nice, be tidy, and get the right books in front of your customers. Bookshops needn't look particularly grand, but they must be well presented. And of course, in these shops, the devil, as we say in English, is in the detail. I'm not sure if that will be translated well, but what these books are, of course, matters absolutely. And what should be put on a table, what should be put on a display, will depend entirely on the individual layout of a shop, what I call the geography of a shop. Is it long and thin, short and fat, one floor, two floors? Local booksellers in each shop must exploit their individual shop and make sure it looks good and that the titles are the books that their customers are interested in. We use ratios to monitor how well we're doing this. And we use relatively small things to try and alert our booksellers to whether they're doing this well or not. For example, we have a book of the month, BOTM, book of the month. We have a thriller of the month. We have a literary book of the month. We have a non-fiction book of the month, a children's book of the month. So we have quite a lot of books of the month. Because we're now really focused on choosing good books, books our customers want, sales are increasing. They have increased by 3 times in the last 2 years. And I'm certain that we can continue to do better at this. And I am challenging my people in 2016 to double this number. Put the very best books in front of your customer. Not the same book everywhere, the right book for your shop and your market. And we're working very hard to ensure that we have the right books on our shelves. In Waterstones, we have 20% more titles in our shops than we did before. And it's not just the number that matters, it's the quality of those books. We need to drive out the books our customers are not interested in and bring in the ones they are. We need to examine and interrogate what sections our customers are interested in, what subjects. The way in which people shop and what they're interested in is constantly changing. And it changes between different shops and in different locations. So again, we really think that one through and interrogate it all the time. Do you need academic books? Do you need law books? Do you need medical books? How big is your children's section? Is it important to have more books for babies or more books for children aged 9 to 12? And it's constantly working to improve the mix of books and the quality of books that generates and delivers good bookshops. I'll be talking a bit more about stock in terms of the necessary efficiencies of the way we run our shops. But consider particularly returns. Returns, the books you send back to publishers unsold, are your fault. They are the fault of booksellers. It is simply bad buying. Poor judgment. Putting books in front of your customers they're not interested in. They haven't bought them. We now expect our returns rate to be under 5% at Waterstones. It was always over 20%. And anyone who goes over needs to come and talk to me. It means, in particular, that we work very closely and very collaboratively with publishers. Absolutely essential that both sides of this industry understand that if you put good books in front of your customers, you will sell more of them. And that is the essence of this part. Bookshop is made by its books, and you have to put in the disciplines that allow you to do that. You cannot retail as Waterstones did by what we call planogram. That is a photograph that would arrive on your computer in the shop that says you must put out your books exactly like this, normally because a publisher has paid you to do so. That produced terrible bookshops. We have to improve our stock turn, we have to get rid of returns, and we have to make the booksellers accountable for their stock. If you do this, one of the great advantages is that within a good bookshop and an improving bookshop, you can sell more things that are not books. In a world in which Kindle has destroyed a large part of your sales, you need to sell other things. But you can only sell other things successfully within a very good bookshop. And at Waterstones, I think growing the things that are not books alongside books is absolutely essential to our success, but can only be done if our customers believe they are in a bookshop first and foremost. The next challenge for us is an efficient operation, and that is about ratios, how much you spend. And for us, it was about reducing every cost that we could. We have halved 50% nearly our head office costs, reduced distribution costs, shop payroll, that is our staff, by nearly 30%, stock down nearly a quarter. That is, the value of the books has dropped by a quarter, liberating money to spend on the business, even as we've increased the titles, the number of titles in the shops, by 20%, and returns down 70%. The most difficult, clearly, is reducing the number of people you employ. This is a terrifying graph. I've been using it these last few years here in Venice, and every year the nightmare gets worse. We started in 1011 with a business that knew it was in terrible trouble. My predecessors knew they had a massive difficulty and were almost certain to go broke, to close. So they had already reduced staff numbers hugely, and they'd done so destructively. They got rid of the older booksellers, the more expensive booksellers. They made us a much worse bookshop, even as they reduced the numbers. What I believe we're doing underneath this graph, which clearly shows huge increase in productivity, simply how hard our booksellers are working and how efficiently they're working, is doing so in a way that is exploiting the fact that we make the job easier, for example, no returns, more rewarding, so people will work harder and with more passion. And we are now doing the other essential thing, which is look after our booksellers, so paying them more. As we pay people more, we are finding they're becoming even more efficient. And I think that as long as we keep this direct relationship between efficiency and the reward of those who are doing it, we can continue to become more efficient. At Daunt Books, we have sales per employee of 300,000, not 200,000. So there is still substantial room for progress. Stock is the other hugely important thing. I've mentioned it already. But this reduction in the amount of stock and at the same time improving the quality and the number of titles you have in your shop has been massively important to liberating cash to invest in the business. It is detailed work and it is hard work, and it is work that can only be done through constant interrogation. But the rewards are there and are evident. I now come to the soul of the business, the booksellers. How do you energize booksellers? How do you make booksellers simply better at what they do? We, all of us in this room, know what we mean by a good bookseller. Somebody who smiles as you come in, somebody who knows about the books and can knowledgeably help you, somebody who informs you and excites you about what is being published. That is absolutely essential to the character and the enjoyment of being in a bookshop. Friendliness, energy, knowledge. And I think you do that through training, you do that through leadership, you do that through placing the book and the love of the book at the heart of everything that you do, combined with a total respect for the customer. It is all about empowerment, and it's about ensuring that booksellers sell books, which may sound obvious, but booksellers in the UK used to do many, many things that had nothing really to do with directly selling books. They spent times in offices, they spent times organizing things, they spent time packing up books to go back to publishers. We had very rigid, hierarchical structures in place. It was very slow for a young bookseller to develop. The job was boring. And everything that we've been doing is about trying to encourage booksellers to take responsibility for their shops, to throw themselves in with a real passion into this profession of ours. A well-led bookshop with good booksellers in it who all want to do the same thing, who love their trade and their craft, will be a dramatically nicer shop for customers to come into. It isn't easy interrogating yourself as to whether you're truly doing that. But I think we need to, and certainly in the UK, most of our chain bookshops, and even many, many of our independent bookshops, would fail any rigorous examination of how good they were, how friendly, how open, how knowledgeable, how much, frankly, the people working in our bookshops love their job. Because what you have to do in a deregulated book market is convince the customer that the book bought from a bookshop is a better book, a much better book, than the book bought from a supermarket or from Amazon. You will enjoy it more. It will feel nicer. It will sit on your shelf and be more beautiful if it comes from a bookshop. And that only happens through the soul of the bookshop, through the process by which, the magical process by which a bookseller enthuses their customer. And does it work? Well, it does. At Waterstones, we are not perfect by any means, and the process of improving has a long way still to go. Nonetheless, our sales are growing relative to other bookshops on the high street, that's the blue line, and they're growing relative to Amazon, which is the red line. We had a very good December, so this trend continues. And it turns out, after all, that price doesn't matter. That this deregulated book market, in which Amazon will sell a best-selling book for 67% less than its cost, doesn't matter. This is a graph of the relative price of books in Waterstones relative to other high street booksellers. We used to be, we ideally were below 10%, but it crept up just when I joined to about 10%. As we began to improve, we moved up the pricing. We are now consistently more than 20%, normally 24, 25% more expensive than W.H. Smith or the other high street booksellers. Blackwell's is much cheaper than us. Everybody is. Independents are even more expensive than Waterstones by about another 5 to 10%. I failed to put a graph in here for the difference with Amazon. And mainly, I think, subconsciously, because it frightens me every time I look at it. We were 38% more expensive than Amazon during December on the top 5,000 titles. That's quite a lot. We were 40% more expensive on the top 100 titles. In other words, our customers knowingly, deliberately bought all the bestsellers from us 40% more expensive than if they'd bought them from Amazon. And clearly, as far as I'm concerned, they did so because they know or believe or experience that the books bought from us are better than the books bought from Amazon. And they are. It is simply more enjoyable to be in a well-run, fun, engaged, and vibrant bookshop where the book choice has been very cleverly done, where you're finding and discovering and seeing books in a sympathetic arrangement, and where a bookseller is helping you choose good ones. It's better for children, it's better for adults, it's better for all book buyers. And it's that lesson that we have painfully, very painfully, had to learn. You cannot be a bad bookshop in a deregulated market. And the truth was that in an in a regulated market, it was too easy. We were flabby, unfit, complacent, and we produced poor bookshops. I'm not remotely suggesting that that is the case with your bookshops, but it's worth asking the question. And indeed, here we are. We're making a bit more money now, really proper money. The satisfaction from doing this is that our booksellers, I think, are enjoying their jobs as they have not done for many, many years. We are attracting better people into the trade, and we're keeping them. And above all, we're providing these lovely bookshops that are attractive, with the right books in them, for our customers. And we're bringing more customers, more book lovers, and more book readers back into our shops. We're doing so, I think, knowing that this matters, knowing that particularly these sort of customers, children, are the future of us, and we have to engage them, inspire them, and ensure that they turn their backs on Amazon. I've been a little quicker than I thought I would. I've finished. Thank you very much.
Allora ci sarebbe lo spazio per fare delle domande, se qualcuno vuole iniziare. Stefano?
Sì, io ho una domanda perché ho visto i dati che abbiamo chiesto ai componenti della tavola rotonda di domani. Il dato in cui Waterstone si discosta di più dagli altri librai di domani è, se i dati che abbiamo riportato sono giusti, l'incidenza del costo del personale sul fatturato, che incide per il 10% contro il 18-20% delle altre librerie. È il dato sbagliato o veramente sei riuscito a abbassare così tanto il costo del personale?
The graph that I had, this graph, I called it a catastrophe, a nightmare, and it is a nightmare. You should not be running your bookshops with payroll at 10, 11, 12%. Daunt Books runs it at 15, 17%. We at Waterstones, to succeed in the long term, must pay our booksellers better. But we will do so by making them more efficient. And the truth is, we simply could not survive with the numbers of booksellers that we had. And we are beginning to do that. We now have a bonus system in place. We gave a 6% bonus on top of a 3% pay wage increase this year. So beginning to see proper inflation of pay at Waterstones. And I would be much happier if the 10% ratio was more like 15. But that was achieved by paying individual booksellers better, rather than increasing the numbers of booksellers.
Qualcun altro vuole fare delle domande?
Ne avrei una io. Se posso chiedere cosa sta facendo Amazon per contrastare la vostra nuova rinascita, oltre che la leva prezzo, se sta aumentando i servizi per i suoi clienti o qualcos'altro.
Amazon is a competitor like no other. Amazon is improving its service all the time. Over Christmas, they would do same-day delivery in London and a couple of other big cities. Order a book in the morning, you have it in the afternoon, 40% cheaper. It is this extraordinary service that they give that remains a constant threat. But again, my answer to Amazon is they're fantastic, extraordinary, they have everything. Availability is brilliant, service is impeccable. So our bookshops have to sell better books than theirs. They have to be better. And that all comes through this creating these great bookshops. And I anticipate, in fact, that Amazon will simply become ever more efficient. But the fact that they are so inexpensive is irrelevant now. And I think, I truly believe that we've probably lost the true Amazon customer and will not get them back. What we have to get back are the people who like being in shops, in which case it doesn't matter what Amazon does, because they will never replicate that.
Romano?
Volevo chiedere a James il processo di prenotazione a novità. Tu l'hai spiegato, mi pare, l'anno scorso, ma sarebbe bene ricordarlo. Cioè, prima c'era una centralizzazione degli acquisti delle novità e adesso invece come avviene l'assortimento, cioè la prenotazione della novità nella catena? Anche ora è
I need about an hour to answer that properly. We order all new books centrally, every single one. But we pretty much take in everything that a publisher publishes, but in small quantities. It is then up to the local bookshops to respond to those books. We don't presume anymore that we know what our bookshops want. So the local bookshops will get maybe only 10 copies of a best-selling book. They used to get 100, but we only give them 10. We put out lots of information which says, be careful. We think you probably want 100 of this, but we've only given you 10. And then locally, they react. We do that, though, through a complicated process where for every 4 or 5 shops, one person does that. And they know all their booksellers, they're talking to all their booksellers all the time, and any bookseller can ask for books. Give me 10 copies of this, 5 copies of another. These ISBNs I've found, these books. And the central person is there to ensure that we know who asked for those books. Because if you ask for 20 copies of a book, and it's still there a month later, we come and ask you why. You wanted 20, why haven't you sold it? If you thought it was so good, sell it. And some booksellers, it is true, are fabulous booksellers in terms of the service they give, the energy, but they're rubbish at choosing the number of copies of a book they need. So the person who always wants 50, but only ever sells 10, whenever they ask for 50, we give them 10. And that seems to work quite nicely. The key, for me, is that the local booksellers choose the stock and the quantities they have, but that they are accountable for selling them. And there is no longer the mentality that it doesn't matter, we'll just send it back to the publisher.
Una cosa. James, ma questo presuppone però una distribuzione molto efficiente, cioè un servizio di rifornimento veloce ed efficiente.
The improvement in our logistics in the central distribution has been vital to this. In that slide, I had one which said we'd reduced our distribution costs by 20%. You should have thought that's not very much, given what he's doing everywhere else. And the reason is that we have dramatically improved our distribution. We now have next-day delivery on, it's going to be 12,000 at the moment titles. It's moving up to about 28,000 shortly. We think that 80% of the books that we sell will be resupplied into our bookshops within 24 hours. It means a bit more stock centrally, but it means that availability in shops can be improved and maintained at a very high level on less stock overall. We already in the United Kingdom had very efficient wholesalers, much I think as they do in Germany, which allowed independent bookshops to resupply very quickly on a next day basis. And we now have that also at Waterstones. It's absolutely essential. And we've also made our booksellers accountable for the accuracy of their inventory. If you allow your computer systems to become inaccurate in your shop, whether through theft or error, then your availability goes down, obviously. And in Waterstones and in many independents, they don't really work on that, the booksellers. And we now require inventory accuracy. And we've brought down the level of inaccuracy at stock checks that used to run at about 14, 15%, huge percentage of the stock books that we should be there weren't there. That's now down to about 4, 5%, and I believe we can reduce it still further. It's about booksellers constantly checking and interrogating their stock.
Gli allievi? Solo il comitato, gli allievi spesso. Gli allievi. Se non c'è, eccola.
Mi rendo conto che è una domanda complessa, forse richiederebbe che lei stesse qui tutto il pomeriggio, però mi piaceva sapere qualcosa in più sulle tecniche o comunque modalità che ha attuato per la motivazione al personale.
Bella domanda.
I think motivation of staff is a combination of an immense number of things that inform how they spend their day. But in terms of essential initiatives, it has been to get rid of the things that were not productive or not enjoyable for them. So really interrogating, what are they doing that isn't fun? And trying to get rid of it. And it is astonishing how much goes on in bookshops, because it's always gone on in bookshops. It doesn't add great value, and it's really boring. Simple things like counting the money. I don't know how many of you count the money that you take in your tills. It's really boring to do that. So we now have a central collection of money, and it's counted by another party, not by the bookshop, because it's really boring. We used to check and balance our tills every day. It's really boring to do that, and it is based on a belief that all our booksellers only take their jobs because they want to steal from us. That's not why they take their jobs. So we now balance our tills once a month if they're accurate, once a fortnight if they're not quite accurate, once a week if there are problems. So most shops, again, are becoming ever more accurate because they don't like reconciling tills. But it's mainly about talking about books, caring about books, introducing training and discussion around books, because in my experience, booksellers work in bookshops because they love books. And in the past, we didn't talk about books very much. We talked about operational things, how you do this process or how you do that process. But now we spend an awful lot of time discussing which are the good books. Why is this a good book? Why is that a good book? Encouraging debate and conversation between our booksellers that is the kind of conversation that they should be having with their customers. But it also is about treating them well, trusting them. We have increased the staff discount for books from 25% to 50%. They don't have to wear uniforms. They can wear their own clothes. Anything that we think they will enjoy, we give them. And we have invested a great deal of effort to try and make the bookshop managers as good as possible, because leadership is really important. And part of that has been horrible. We dismissed half the bookshop managers at Waterstones because we didn't think they were good enough. You will not, as a bookseller, I believe, work for somebody who doesn't inspire you. And that is what we assessed all our managers upon. It's not easy and it's not nice, but the result is a much, much happier place in which to work.
Velocissimo, ci avevi raccontato, James, che voi vendavate come device il Kindle e mi pare che non lo facciate più. Perché e se avete in mente di vendere un altro tipo di device?
We sold Kindles because it was the best device in the United Kingdom, and I believe that as a bookseller you should always work in the interest of your customer, and therefore it only made sense to sell Kindles. And there was a demand for it, and actually we did sell a lot, and we made some very welcome money from doing so. The sales of Kindles dropped very dramatically about after the Christmas before this one. So after Christmas 2015, we had really disappointing sales, and then at the start of the year, virtually no sales at all. So in the United Kingdom, it appears that the demand for the devices has dropped away almost completely. So it made no sense for us to be selling them. Would we like to sell a reader? I think, under the English expression, the horse has already bolted from that stable. It's too late to close the door. There simply isn't a demand for a device, but I foresee a world in which you read on your tablet, you read on your phone even, you read in whatever other device that you have. And Waterstones clearly should be selling e-books to its customers. And it is a massive strategic difficulty not to be doing so. But we don't have the money to do it at the moment. And in the UK, there is no possibility of entering that market in any affordable manner, particularly whilst the copyright on and the DRM is ensuring and locking people into an Amazon world.
Bene, io direi che ringrazio...
Avevo una curiosità, chiedo scusa.
Sì, prego.
Posso?
Certo.
Mr. James, volevo chiederle come faceva a rimanere sul 5% di libri resi sullo stock e come faceva a generare un equilibrio tra assortimento, proposta e eventuali mancanze. È un traguardo importante, il 5%.
The even more terrifying Daunt books has 0. We do not return any books other than for events. And the reason is, if you have a quick supply chain, the reality in every bookshop I've ever worked in, even our largest bookshops, is that you don't sell on a daily basis a large volume of any title other than the very obvious. And the very obvious, it's easy to have lots of. It simply isn't the case that you sell 10 or 20 copies of one book, one title, that is not an obvious book. So if you are constantly replenishing, every time you sell something, you reorder it in, and you're doing so intelligently, I don't believe that you need the volume of books that results in returns. You may occasionally have to wait if you make a small mistake for that to sell through, but you don't need to send it back to the publisher. And certainly at Daunt Books, sometimes we do have to wait a bit to get rid of books, but they all sell in the end. There's very, very, very little that truly goes dead. And within Waterstones, our availability has been improving steadily throughout this period. So even as returns have dropped, availability has been going up. And within that also, the sales of the key titles are also going up. It is not that we're selling less copies of these major selling books because we don't have huge piles of them. You need a good stock control system and a good distribution system.
Bene, grazie James. Thank you very much.